Thank you, everybody, for joining. This is really cool. This is like the future teacher information session. This is a chance for me to see, to hang out with a bunch of really wonderful people, really outstanding alums of our program here, our department, NRMA program. Very quickly, Fernando Sanchez is in from UC Berkeley. He's a PhD student at UC Berkeley. Jose Castro is in from UCLA. I see you got your sweatshirt on there, Jose. UCLA. Kristina Cardinale is in from UC Riverside, right around the corner here. And Alexander Serrano is in from UC Santa Barbara. So it's an all UC gang. We'll see, maybe Sarah will join us later from Mississippi, and maybe Rocio from UC Riverside. But it's an absolute delight. We're going to talk in a sort of free-form way. I asked you all, if you wanted to lead with comments, you're welcome to do that. But we're also okay, getting right into the mix of questions and comments. I'm going to throw it over to Kristina Cardinale first, and then Alex, and then Fernando, and then Jose. For some just hellos, and if you want to share some opening remarks, you're welcome to do so.
Hi, everyone. So nice to see all of you. It's such deja vu coming back on Zoom and seeing all these familiar faces. I'm Kristina Cardinale, as Dr. Murray said. I'm a third-year PhD over at UCR. I was in the inaugural history MA here at Cal State San Bernardino. And I lecture part-time as well as at Cal State, excuse me. As you can tell, I've been doing a lot of lecturing, so all of my smart words are kind of out the door because we're in finals week right now. But that's a little bit about me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alexander. As Jeremy mentioned, I'm a PhD student at Santa Barbara. I think probably in the minority here, but I'm not actually in the history department. I'm the East Asian Language and Culture Studies department, but I did graduate in 2022 with my master's in history here at San Bernardino. So nice to see some familiar faces again.
Am I next? I forgot the order.
Yeah, go ahead, Fernando, please.
Hi, everybody. I totally forgot about this meeting. So I just got out of my boxing session. So I'm walking on my way home. I'm a little tired, but I will always jump on the Zoom when Jeremy asks. I graduated from the history department at CSUSB. When was that? 2020, I think, right at the end of COVID or beginning of COVID, 2021. I got my MA at UC Berkeley, and now I'm preparing for my quals at Berkeley as well. So it's been a wild ride, but happy to talk as always.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jose. I'm also from the first cohort in the MA and San Bernardino. I'm doing my first year in UCLA in Chicana Studies. So I'm happy to be here. So any questions, welcome.
Thanks, guys, for jumping right in. And funny, Fernando, thanks for joining. And no worries, I know that PhD life is wild. I also did boxing as a PhD student. There's something maybe cathartic about getting in and just getting your physical aggression and all of the feeling out. I had and I had a boxing partner in the China program at UCSD. So and there's Aiden coming in. And to Alexander's point, it struck me actually when you said that, Alexander, about being in the interdisciplinary East Asian Studies program, that indeed Jose is also in an interdisciplinary program. And I see Jasmine Colorado is in and was asking about both history programs, but also interdisciplinary programs. So that may be a theme that emerges here because Jose and Alex are both in interdisciplinary doctoral programs. And Kristina and Fernando are both in history programs.
Can we explain the difference to us all?
Yeah, in brief, and then I'm going to ask Alex and Jose to explain. But You can get a PhD in American Studies or Chicano Studies or East Asian Studies, Gender Studies. You can get a PhD in that, and you can have your studies be focused in one, more or less in one particular field, but it'll be a mixed methods type of approach to your research that'll incorporate a number of different fields. It might include literature, anthropology, sociology, political science, economics, and lots of other disciplines like that. Alex and Jose, do you want to give a quick note about the differences in your experience in terms of moving into an interdisciplinary program as opposed to a history department?
Sure. I'm preparing my reading list for my comprehensive exams right now. So a lot of what is going on is that my committee is based, I have one historian because that's my background is in that, and I still do that work. But I also have a cultural anthropologist on my committee, and I also have a literature scholar also on my committee. And so a lot of what I do in the cultural studies department is actually branching out what it means to look at culture as a lens, right? So it's more than just history. It also looks at literature, it looks at religion and philosophy. I know the one that's pretty much been beating me up every time I try to do it is literary and film analysis with one of my committee members. That's a totally different ballgame with a close analysis of a text. And essentially, kind of like what Jeremy was mentioning, is when you get this degree, I think, at least in my case, it also does not just limit me to in some cases just to my specific field, right, based on my committee members, but I can also on the job market, I could technically work in, say, language teaching. I can also do history department. I could do anthropology. I could do Asian studies. I can do Chinese studies. I can do Chinese literature. I could do Chinese religions. And so it kind of gives me the benefit of all these different fields that I can pull theories and methods from.
Yeah, in my case, also is the same as Alex. My background is a history. My advisor is a historian, but I'm gonna be focusing also on religious studies and social anthropology, and also, I mean, Alex already mentioned them. We have to be able to learn the methods, like in the case ethnic studies and methods and sociology. But pretty much my full background as a historian, I will be using it because my research is gonna be about history, but mixed with religious studies and ethnic studies.
That's cool. So even within this diversity, this further diversity of language studies, Alex is very heavily into language studies, as one must be in the field of Chinese history. And Jose is interested in religious studies, and he's followed his nose to find Robert Chow Romero and this really exciting interdisciplinary studies program at UCLA that suits him so well. I want to get out of the way that very quick idea in case anybody's going to miss it, is that when you're applying to a PhD program, look for an advisor that you want to work with, and that ultimately wants to work with you based on interaction and collaboration and discussion and emailing with them. That's a really important thing. I want to sort of get out of the way as a very foundational thing. You apprentice yourself more or less to an advisor when you get into a PhD program. They have to be excited about working with you. You have to be excited about working with them. I was saying to Jasmine earlier that your application makes its way through the grad committee, and you want somebody to grab it and say, that one's mine. I want this student coming in here. I want to work with this student if we have funding. That's your end game, right? That's what you want to happen. And then if there's room, there's room. Kristina said, I focus on the American West and public history. If anyone's question about qualification exams, I just took mine, so that may be something that would be great, Kristina. And when it comes back around Fernando, there's you got it. Okay. Oh no, Danny asked orthodox or southpaw stance. So I think we're going to get into a boxing discussion there with Fernando and Danny. But Kristina, please jump in, and then we'll come back around to Fernando to talk about his subfield and his boxing stance. Kristina, please.
Oh, sure. So I just took my written exam. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about those, but I know for me, that was probably the most intimidating part of the PhD process, just kind of going into it. So I've taken like my language exams, my written exams. I'm expected to take my orals next month, or I'm sorry, next term. And I should be ABD by June. So if anyone has any questions about stuff like that, I'm like super happy to jump in. I focus mostly my research on the American West. And I really echo too what Jeremy said about making sure you have faculty that's excited about working with you. For those of you who are in that application process, that's my number one, like I would say my number one tip for applying is reaching out to faculty, trying to build some rapport with people and getting them excited about working with you. My current advisor, he was really wonderful. I reached out to him when I was applying and he was really excited by my research. And so he ended up really helping me with a lot of my application materials and my application essay. And so if you have someone, you know, obviously a tenured professor who's in the department, he knows everyone who's going to be reading that essay. It's very helpful. So that's just kind of quick, unless anyone has any specific questions.
You talk about, did you call them entrance exams, or did you say you're filing out of the program? And what is the nature of the questions for the language, the history exam, or whatever it is? I'm not planning on getting a doctorate. I'm going to die before I can finish one, I'm sure. I'm the old guy, so.
The qualification exams. So the quals.
The quals.
Yeah.
That's at the end of your.
No, that's at the end of your coursework. Which will be your first 2 or 3 years, and it'll be the equivalent of an MA, which is separate to
The one you may already have.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So, Kristina, was that right? Your qualifying exams at the end of your initial MA coursework.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's more or less they're written exams. You have a written portion and then you have an oral portion. And yeah, as Jeremy said, this happens after your coursework. I already came in with a master's, so I was able to finish mine up pretty quickly compared to other people in my cohort who are still kind of knocking out those credits. But for my written exam, you have one for your primary field and then you have one for your supplementary field. Mine is American West, and then I also have, I'm working on my supplementary field for public history. So essentially you have a committee. Those are basically your main advisors for all of your fields. And they work with you to kind of see like, okay, well, what books are you reading? What are the key themes? You help develop, you essentially create a reading list. And most people, I mean, it's about like, I don't know, 60 to 100. Mine was about like 100 books / articles, mostly books. And you just kind of figure out what's the theme. And essentially your committee writes, 2 questions per exam and you respond to that. So I took mine almost 3 weeks ago. You get the whole week off. It was really brutal. I would say it was probably the hardest part of the PhD process so far, if I'm being honest. But yeah, you had the whole week off. I think Monday and Friday were 8-hour work days as just like writing. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday were 12-hour writing and reading days. So it was definitely the most extensive.
I'm more interested in the contents. You talked about your reading list. So they take questions from your reading list, anyone they want. So they kind of form the test to you. Is that right? And your
exactly.
studies.
Yeah, it's very customizable. And so essentially, you're going through this reading list. They, approve it. They'll emphasize some readings. And then after a couple months of studying that, which I know Fernando and Alex, you guys are in the thick of it right now, getting all those readings done. But essentially, you have those conversations about your readings with your committee members throughout your process. So by the time exam rolls around and they have to write your exam questions, you more or less know what main theme at least is going to be covered. For mine were very specific. And so I think it also kind of depends on your committee members. Unfortunately, some people I think are more willing to hear you out than others.
Thanks, Kristina.
Thank you.
And this is relevant because our first year MA students are starting to put together reading lists. as well, whether it's headed toward a thesis or for many of you,
Sure.
be headed toward portfolio, which is similar in structure to what we're talking about. I see Margaret has your hand up. I want to quickly note that Fernando is in the Near Eastern Studies program. So we have 3 area studies folks, and Kristina in the history department. Thanks, Fernando. Toss it over to Margaret, please.
There we go. I finally got it to unmute. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I just had a quick question for Kristina, but really it's for everyone. When you talk about finding a faculty advisor and all of those things, it's sort of like you're really courting a mentor. Can you walk us through the cold email? Because that's the part that gets me, is like the cold emailing of these people. And like you're looking at these people like they're in a magazine, like picking out who you're gonna buy. And then you have to like cold email them. And it's very unnatural to me.
Yeah, it's definitely, no, I totally feel you on that. For me, mine was kind of recommended. And so maybe depending on who your direct kind of advisor over your studies is, they might have a list. Otherwise, as far as selection, I mean, I know you asked about the email for sure. As far as selection, figuring out people obviously who are, most attuned to like what you research, definitely that's what you want to look for. But as far as the cold email, it doesn't hurt to name drop. Like I said, like my advisor during my MA, who's my boss now, which is so crazy. But he worked for my current PhD advisor. So I'm kind of like a Nepo academic baby, even though I don't benefit from that in real life. But in academia, I do. So, just hitting them up, but also, I think a lot, especially if it's a scholar you want to work with, they are excited to hear about who you are, what's your research, and why you want to apply. So maybe even just like kind of an elevator pitch on your personal statement. That's helpful. A quick paragraph like, hi, if you happen to have been recommended that person, definitely mention who recommended them to you. But just, I think being friendly, and I think too, honestly, it sounds overstated, but that's also one of my #1 tips in academia is to be friendly, because a lot of people, and I'm sure Jeremy and everyone else knows about this, we're not like the most like personable bunch, maybe in the social science departments, but it does help to stand out because if you are personable, if you are nice, if you're the person that the professor is going to remember from the class, they're the people who, are going to be on your side and really helpful for faculty. So I guess that's kind of how I go about it. Go, be professional, be friendly, give them a quick elevator pitch about what you study and why you want to work with them.
That's really good advice, and it is very common, Kristina, to have that sort of grappling hook into the program that is an advisor or a friend or a colleague or somebody who knows somebody and can help you with that initial email. But I also think, yeah, being professional and kind, nice, polite, professional. I would say consider being quite brief in the initial email. Don't send a 2-page email with lots of attachments, that kind of thing. But give a quick introduction, and indeed mention your interests and why and how they align, and maybe who you've worked with. That's helpful. But to Kristina's point, Margaret, and for you that would be Professor Karp. You could sit down with Professor Karp with a specific thing in mind and say, who could be a prospective good advisor. You don't have to go in this totally cold. You've got a lot of people in your corner who are going to be happy to help you navigate people to reach out to. I had, as an undergraduate, I had somebody say, whatever you do, don't apply to this program right now. It's a mess. And that was really helpful because there are a lot of superstar faculty in that program, which I won't name, but it's very close to Berkeley. It's not Berkeley, but that particular program was an absolute disaster at that time.
And Stanford, or
I will neither confirm nor deny. It was at that particular moment. It's 25 years ago. But I had an advisor who said, look, it's in chaos right now, and anybody going into that is going to be like thrown into this territorial turf war and get sucked into these battles within the history department. So just be warned. And I think talking to a faculty member who may have that kind of perspective will save you an enormous amount of time and grief. So remember, you've got people, to carry on the boxing metaphor, you've got a cuts man in Professor Karp. You've got somebody in your corner who's going to sort of help you navigate that. Erin, jump in, please.
Yeah, so I have a quick question for anybody that wants to answer it, but do you need to be near the campus that you want to study under for a PhD program, or is it kind of like you can be online or you show up once a month? How does that work out if you're applying for certain PhD programs?
I can say quickly, you're going to need to be there. Go ahead, Fernando, please.
Yeah, no, sorry. I was just going to jump in and say, yeah, you need to be there. So programs, especially some of the bigger ones, will sometimes pay for you to move. Like I remember I got, I think, $1,000 moving. And it does take a lot of work to set it up. I didn't move that far, luckily. So I was in SoCal, and then moved to NorCal, which is really the middle of California. It's about 6 hours away. It is stressful though, and you do have to plan it out because you have to be on campus. You have to, at least for your first years until you finish your quals, you have to be on campus because you have to be taking classes there and you have to be able to meet with faculty, so on and so forth. Once you're done with quals, you typically get a research year. I know if in history department, I think we get one too. And then you start writing your dissertation. And if you have fellowships or any type of grant funding, then you could likely be wherever you want. But you likely will have to teach still. So yeah, you have to be on campus or at least close to it, unless you're, again, traveling for research or doing, again, another like, I know that the Ivies have this thing called Ivy Plus, which you can basically take a semester and courses at another Ivy League, as well as like Stanford and Berkeley. I think there was a couple others who are on it too. All this to say though is that when you're applying to programs, be aware that you're going to have to live there. So if you hate the East Coast and can't stand to see it snow and be indoors for the whole winter, consider that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm married, so it's kind of like hard to move. That's why I was asking.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I
Erin.
will say really quick. In my case, I got accepted in University of Arizona, but had to decline because, of course, they provide me the funding and everything, but it wasn't enough for me to move. So I had to decline and wait one more year until I got accepted to UCLA. So yeah, it is really important to know how much money you have, or if you have money to move, or do you have the possibility to move, uh, or try just to apply like around or wherever you can move.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. Thanks, Erin. Danny, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Murray. So I wanted to ask anyone this question, and if you can answer who are in PhD programs. So I've heard that like it's practically impossible, or it's not allowed for you to work like a part-time or a full-time job while going to grad school full-time. And that's, I heard it, the reason why is because of the workload, and practically like if you work full-time or part-time while going to grad school or a PhD program full-time, it'll be hard for you to keep up, obviously, and pass your classes overall. So I just wanted to see if that's true, because I've considered, applying in the past, but once I heard about that, I kind of felt discouraged because like I can't really afford that right now. And I mean, they say there's stipends and like just grants and loans, but I'm just wondering like if that's still going to be enough to cover your living expenses, especially if, depending on like your living situation and your financials and all that.
So I totally understand where you're coming from on that. I was working full time before I did my, I was working full time while I did my master's as well. But I was able to quit my job because of my first year fellowship. And then I know it's different for every campus, even UC to UC, it's different. But so your first full year, at least for me, it was fully funded. And I'm lucky and I got summer funding as well. And so I was able, it was pretty much the same as I was making. And the nice thing too about being an employee by the UC, which for me, so it's my first year was covered, second year you TA basically, you TA every single year, and that's your salary you're making. So you go from a full year of fellowship to essentially making a salary. And then I started lecturing half time, part time at Cal State as well. So I was picking up classes. So I am able to make a pretty good living now. And both of those positions, academic workers and then also CFA, those are both union jobs. So I've actually gotten 2 raises, 1 raise per position since I've worked both jobs. And I've probably done both for the last year and a half. It is a bit like, you're not really supposed to like let admin know because we are like contracted workers. So it's not necessarily something that everyone publicizes to like the dean, that, hey, we all have part-time jobs, adjunct lecturing. But a lot of people are able to do that. And honestly, I think especially my friends who have kids and stuff like that, they do it. And so was it hard like my first year to be working? I didn't work my first year, so it was pretty easy. But I think if you want to keep your job and do your classes your first year, it's pretty much the same as the MA course load. So I hope that was helpful.
Okay, yeah, very helpful. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Kristina. Did anybody else want to jump in on the funding issues? I know it was definitely tricky for me at UCSD, and until I got some external funding. I got the now defunct Javits Fellowship that I know Fernando and Alex would have been eligible for. Sorry to mention that now, but it was it was the gravy train. I got it, and it was really nice. It relieved me of some duties. But I think you can get there are other external fellowships that you can get that can reduce your TA obligations. There may be a flip side to it. They may have conditions where they don't want you doing the kind of part-time work that Kristina's picking up. So it's complex. You cobble it together. Again, in this, like many other situations, having an active and a supportive advisor or a set of advisors is going to be very important because they're going to locate things and throw them at you and say, hey, make sure you apply for this and get this money and that kind of thing. But Alex, Fernando, Jose, do you want to jump in on the funding question? It's a big one.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry,
go
you go. Okay, I'll go. Yeah, look for external fellowships. That definitely lightens the load a lot. But again, it's kind of tricky because I've had this discussion with my GSAO or the graduate student advisor in my department, where I'm like, hey, can I take on these fellowships? And she was like, what's the workload? Because a lot of times if you accept a fellowship, they'll expect you to produce a paper or travel or any number of things. So you have to double check that that's not going to interfere with whatever your requirements or responsibilities are for the university. Sometimes you can just not tell them. I've done that before and been fine. But yeah, I don't know, funding's a bit of a weird thing. It's also kind of strange because even though we're all called grad students, like technically this is our job, right? Like we all are employed by the university. We get healthcare through the university. And the amount of funding you get, unfortunately, does depend on your department, whether or not it's a richer, poorer department. I have friends in like the comp lit and history department. They all get paid like $5,000 more than I do, which is unfortunate. But we all also did get a slight pay bump because a couple years ago we had a strike. There's a lot of ways to get money, but it's also you have to really pay attention to the program you're applying for and the funding they offer you, because before you accept, they'll send you like basically a contract saying this is what we can offer you. Mine was pretty nice. Like I got a fellowship that was 2 years funding, and then I had to TA or teach. But also I had guaranteed summer funding, and I still do actually, which is remarkable. Because my department had to match the grant that I was offered. So again, it's a weird thing, but if you're going to like a paid program, like you will have money. It's essentially your job at that point. Yeah. It's not going to be a lot of money, but you will be able to live.
Yeah, well, you already say, Fernando. Yeah, once you get the letter, if you get accepted to any university, double check how much is going to be the funding. And once you meet the school, try to negotiate your funding. And some schools like UCLA, they didn't allow us to work the first quarters. So we had to be pretty much stick in the school with the money they give us. But after that, we can have part-time jobs. So pretty much look into your program, your advisors, and try to look how much money they can provide you.
Thanks, Jose. We'll go to question from Corey and in just a second, and then Hayden. I just wanted to quickly flag a couple notes from Alex, who is sharing some material here in the chat alongside. And I think really important to know, because housing is so important. You're in very, very wonderful areas. If you're in Santa Barbara, if you're at UCLA and Berkeley, Riverside, you're in really sought after neighborhoods. And so housing is very, very important. Alex has decided, oh, actually, no, sorry. I'll come back to that sidebar on the letter, but Alex is in Seaside University housing, subsidized $1,500 a month for beachside 2-bedroom because he's married. That made him a priority going in there. And depending on your institution, there can be family style housing that you can apply for and maybe get. The wait list for graduate family housing here at UCSB Santa Barbara is 2 years. Can be 2 years, can be 6 months, can be longer, can be shorter. But before you get a spot, the average apartment here is around $2,600 a month for 1 bedroom without that. And so he gets in for $1,500 in this nice beachside 2-bedroom. So that's, I think that's pretty sweet. Thank you, Kristina. Oh, Kristina had to jump out. We already, yeah, she's on. So she gave a lot of great information. And then she had to head out. She also put her email address. Note that Kristina put her email address, and these guys are happy to hear from you. So go ahead and send them a note there. And I just wanted to say a quick also sidebar. Alex made some good points here. Sidebar about the cold email. Knowing what you're interested in doing. So give it some thought. Give it a lot of thought and maybe some rehearsals and kick it around with some friends and colleagues and faculty. It's useful to know what you're interested in doing before you reach out to faculty. When Alex sent in his email, he explained his research interests to professors, and most importantly, asked us if they were even considering taking on new students for the application cycle. That's very, very absolutely essential. Keep the email short but professional. Knowing the research work of the advisor is also a plus before you talk to them. Yeah, that's a nice thing for them to see that you know something about what they're interested in. It's very important. To Fernando and Jose's points just now, I think another big sort of chunky idea, just nobody should miss here, is that you're essentially being hired. It's not just getting accepted, like a student getting accepted. They're more or less hiring you for 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, definitely hard work, but 6, 7, 8 could be longer. You're getting hired by this institution, so it's a major vote of confidence in a highly selective application process. You're getting hired. I think that's a really important distinction to make. You're not just getting into law school or getting into med school or getting into an MA program. You're getting hired. I think that's just an important sort of thing to consider. Corey, please jump in.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today, first of all, and thank you, Professor Murray, for hosting this seminar. It's super helpful for us. My question is geared towards Fernando, since you mentioned an excellent point about living on campus. And that's that, is it feasible to not necessarily live on campus if your school is within an hour that you attend a PhD program at, or is that unrealistic? Because as you probably remembered, you know, SoCal and CSUSB is literally at that sweet spot where all the PhD programs available to us are essentially about an hour. Well, a lot of them are about an hour away or within an hour. Of course, there's the awesome ones up north where it's more than that. But yeah, so I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that about living on campus and whether it's what's feasible and unrealistic and whatnot. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, sorry, really fast. If I understand your question, you're asking like if it's feasible to live like an hour away from campus, and whether or not like you have to live on campus or not.
Yeah, like an hour and under an hour. Like that kind of
Okay,
training. Yeah.
okay. It's better if you live closer to campus, but in urban areas like Berkeley or UCLA or like really anywhere that's in a city, you can probably live, I wouldn't say an hour away. Like the farther away, the harder it gets. It depends on your schedule. It depends on how quickly you can get to campus if you have a car. At Berkeley, we can all take the bus for free, which is great. I also get the BART for free. Just it was a weird program. They were like test running it, and I was one of the few who was selected. So that was fortunate. A friend of mine did live in San Francisco. She lived pretty far in, and I think it took her like maybe 30 minutes or 45 minutes on the BART and then a bus ride. And she did it for a semester, and that was fine. So it depends. How early your schedule is, how early you're willing to get up, how much of a commute you're willing to go on. It is feasible. I don't live on campus. I may have mentioned this, but I live like maybe a 15-20 minute bus ride, and then I walk to campus. It's like an hour, but it just depends on what you can get done. If you have a bike, you can get there quicker. So whatever's feasible. There's always options, I would say.
I will jump on this one too because I don't live in UCLA. I live in my home over here in West Covina, which is like 50 minutes away from campus. And most of the students in UCLA, they live out of campus. Some of them, and there is a lot of bus provided by the school. We have free passes for the bus. So I suggest you look at the where you want to live, and as I say, most of the students live out of the campus because it's cheaper.
Oh, thank you. So it's cheaper even with the funding to
Yeah,
live.
yeah, even with the funding.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
wow.
I
Okay.
would say it depends. Sorry. A lot of the times it is cheaper. Like it's
Mhm.
cheaper for me too, but I also have friends like I forget who, but someone mentioned subsidized housing. If you can get that through the university and if you have a partner, it might be cheaper to live in like graduate designated housing or family housing. But again, like the place that I got, it's like renting a room in a house with other roommates. It's lovely. Like I love it here, and it was cheaper, but that I got lucky. I'm like on the very low end of rent cost here. I know friends who are paying a lot more than me. There's also other like I don't know. I have friends who live in co-ops, which are sometimes questionable, but they can be very good depending on what type of lifestyle you want to live.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate both of you for answering that because as you guys both know, um, Berkeley is an expensive city, obviously, and so is Brentwood. So, yeah, these are definitely good things to consider. So, thank you. I appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks, Fernando and Jose and Alex for your notes as well. Yeah, it's tricky. Living is tricky, and it's one of those things that you're going to want to discuss. Well, you get accepted, and then you can start talking about these sort of things. Get accepted into 5 programs. That's what I recommend everybody. And then get accepted into 5 PhD programs, and then they will throw a beautiful apartment at you. Hayden, and then back to Terry, please.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Is this
Yes.
awesome? Cool. I got these new AirPods. I haven't used them yet, so cool, they work. So yeah, I mean, kind of piggybacking a little bit off of what Aaron asked too, because I'm married as well. So I gotta throw an elevator pitch to the wife here to make a commitment like this for a number of years. So I was kind of curious. I know you mentioned this, not so much you're a student, but you're kind of being employed by these schools. And so there's an X amount of income that you guys are getting. So I'm kind of curious. I mean, maybe not exact numbers, but maybe ballpark ranges of what you get paid, what the work schedule is like. And furthermore, for myself, I mean, my wife is pretty well progressed in her own career. So I am kind of anchored to the area. So piggybacking again on like commute distances and what's kind of realistic, essentially having kind of a smaller aperture of programs to apply to, on a scale of 1 to 10, how screwed am I? I guess is kind of a multifaceted question there, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
I
Alex, jump
wanna.
in. Oh, sorry.
Really quick, I'm sorry, I want to add something. Like, for example, UCLA, they have a program which is students with dependents, where they help, uh, with the housing. Also, they give food stamps and all those kind of stuff, and also the insurance. They help you with insurance, health insurance with the students is Mary. So they have this kind of programs there in UCLA. And about your point, yeah, just double check the distance and where you want to apply. And I'll suggest, like Professor Murray said, like I suggest to apply like 5 different schools around the area, and let's see which one uh, get your application.
Oh, I'm a lowly undergrad at this point yet, so I haven't filled out applications. I'm still looking at various programs, but I'm just kind of curious uh, if you do look within a smaller area, how realistic or, unrealistic it may be.
I could probably answer a bit because I am married and I did move. And so it's going to depend on your institution, I think, first and foremost, because they have different types of housing available. For instance, my institution is very notorious for having a housing crisis and a housing bubble here, where especially undergraduates, I mean, if you go to Isla Vista, which is a very kind of infamous location for where undergraduates live and party, you have like 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom houses that there's 11 people living in there. And those are just undergraduates. So in terms of location, it really depends. Some places don't even have graduate housing or on-campus housing that you can even get. Some have some affiliated housing, maybe like off-campus apartments that the university either has a majority stake or some component in it, maybe like board of trustees or something. So it really depends on the institution. In terms of commuting, it's whatever fits in your schedule in time to be able to still accomplish all duties that you have in your life, right? So you're not only are you working at the university, you also have your research and your own coursework, and that's not including all the life things at home that you have to deal with. So spouse, children, dependents, whatever it may be, right? So you have to be able to juggle all these different things. There's not just one answer that fits all. We moved here about 3.5 hours. If I was commuting, it would be about 3.5 hours or 4 hours per day to get to Santa Barbara. And I'm on campus essentially 4 days a week. So, and that's just to do my coursework, right? Um, I was not going to commute, and so we just ended up moving, and that was a conversation that we had for a long time. So there's not like a one fix it answer that you can just use, right? And that's going to be a very difficult conversation to have. But at the same time, I think what you can also consider is I have a lot of colleagues that do live in family housing, right? They either have the 1 or 2 bedroom, and their spouses aren't even in the same country, right? I have some colleagues here where their spouses are in Korea and in China and in Japan. They see each other physically maybe 1 month of the year. Um, and that's just a dialogue that they were able to have with each other. So it's very situation based.
Sure, makes sense. Thank you so much for answering the question. I guess one of my other ones too, and still kind of pointed toward all of you folks, because you mentioned getting an income as well. Is there any kind of range or a number that you guys could throw out? Roughly.
Yeah, like I said, it depends on the department, whether or not it's, I don't know, I don't want to say a richer department, but like certain departments do get more funding. I think it's not a lot. My funding is, I think, 35 grand, if I'm remembering correctly. I have friends that make, I think, 40, some make 42. And then some people in like the computer sciences and like hard sciences will make like 50. So it
Sure,
really
yeah.
depends. Yeah, there's a range.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
And a quick add-on just to the numbers, and then Gustavo has a question. That's very important is health insurance is often covered. And a big one, just in case anybody missed, tuition is all covered. if you get into a PhD program without funding, that's more or less like not getting into the program. Unless you're independently wealthy and the Duke of Windsor or something like that. It's gonna be very, very expensive if you're paying your own tuition, and you're not gonna graduate with a dentist's salary, right? You're not gonna graduate with a lawyer's salary. So I think that's important. You don't want to take on additional debt going into this. It was for me, honestly, because I couldn't contribute a nickel, and my family couldn't contribute a nickel to my time there. It was a tough transition for me going from undergrad, and then from waiting tables in New York City, I was making a lot of money, to being a grad student where I could only pick up 1 or 2 table waiting shifts. So there is a transition, and you learn early in that process that, like Fernando said, I think it's enough to make ends meet, but you know, as Corleone said, this is the life we chose, in the sense of, you know, you get into this because you're really driven by the desire to do research and to teach, to work in a sort of life of the mind. And you know, you get hired eventually by an R1 institution that loves you and wants to throw a lot of money at you, then you can make a fair amount of money. But in terms of just a quick sort of flash ahead, is there are 7 to 12, grade 7 to 12 teachers who are making more than assistant professors. And there are faculty at community colleges who are making more than assistant professors at four-year institutions. So again, there's something else that drives that, right? So you can make ends meet, but there's something else there's another itch that's being scratched when you're going into that field. But we can talk a lot more about it. Sorry, Gustavo will jump in, and then we'll come back to it.
Yes, hello. Thank you. Yeah, my question was like, basically, how is the workload? How many courses do you typically have to take per sem? I don't know if you guys do semesters or whatever system you guys follow. But how does the coursework look, and how many classes do you have to take? Thank you.
He told me to jump in. Are you done? Oh, did they answer you, Gustavo?
I don't think so. I'm just waiting.
I can answer from my end on
Go
coursework.
ahead.
So because I'm still creating my reading list for my exams, so technically I'm still taking coursework. I take about 3 to 4 courses a quarter. I'm on the quarter system here, which is a lot, right? Because I also TA, teaching assistant, right, for a larger course with 60 students under me, more or less. It's a lot of work because it is your job. And then also remember that you're also a student, so you're also doing teaching duties, grading duties, whatever is part of that. And then you also have your own research on top of that, and that can eat up a certain amount of your time. It's a lot of work, but it's also time management. It's to be expected, right? This is your full-time job, or at least it should be treated as such. It depends on your department's requirements. For instance, my university requires you to be advanced or fluent in not just an East Asian language, but also to acquire an additional language. I'm fortunate that I'm fluent in Spanish already, so it's not a problem. I didn't have to take any additional language requirements, right? But in my case, right, I have to obtain fluency, which I'm still working on, in Mandarin Chinese. And then I also take classical Chinese at the same time. And I'm sure Jeremy can tell you all about how classical Chinese works compared to contemporary. So
I'm still working on fluency. I was gonna say, ain't we all, man?
yeah, so it really I think is going to depend on the course requirements for your department on top of that and what you can handle.
If that answered his question, I'd like to ask one. I don't know if you can answer, but I know my nephew applied for 4 PhD programs. And he said because of federal student loans and grants that is on hold right now, they weren't accepting him into programs. All four, two of them were in Oregon and two in this state. Have you heard anything about that? He kind of wondered, I wonder if they're just softening the blow. We aren't taking you. But he asked me and I had no idea. Do you know if they're slowing things down? Because I know Pal loans don't go to PhD programs, but federal loans do. And even the funding for the TA kind of scholarship or whatever.
It's decreasing.
That would be a quick turnaround to make that decision. It's a little bit of a big ship with a small rudder, you know, those kind of big institutional decisions. But in terms of departments accepting a smaller number of students, Alex, Fernando, Jose, have you heard anything about this? Reducing the acceptance rate?
I know that this weekend was actually our new students, and I feel bad, or like our prospective students who got accepted, and I feel bad because I didn't go hang out with them. I was busy. But I think for my cohort, there was 3 accepted. For the one after mine, I actually don't even remember. I've not been keeping up with the new grad students. I've been too busy. I know with this recent one though, it was about 4. And then I know my friends in Complet, their cohort was 3. The one after them was like 7. It depends. Same thing in history. The history had like 20 grad students that got accepted.
This
But
would be
this year-
something new for next year's because they just implemented
Okay.
the cuts.
Yeah.
So I was
Well,
wondering if they
I don't know for next year. Again, I know that we have students accepted coming in for next year, but I do know that like once Trump started cutting federal funding to a lot of universities, a lot of like departments got spooked. I don't know how that's I don't know how that's affecting later acceptance though.
Yeah, the regular grants pay for stuff. I will tell you because I'm at this site, while I'm chasing my PhD, so is my daughter. UPenn, Drexel, those are ones I know of. George Mason, Rutgers, most are big East Coast schools, have already announced, it's on their websites, they will be decreasing enrollment at the graduate and postgraduate level. Because
public facing state.
because these are big research universities, and like Terry pointed out, Columbia just lost $400 million of research money. So
And that changed all curriculum.
and I don't know,
Research.
like I said, I don't know about the other Ivies other than UPenn. I can tell you that the Mid-Atlantic big research universities, George Mason, Georgetown, the Georgias, the DC schools, the Philadelphia schools, that corridor from New York City down to DC have several of the big universities have, because like I got the notification from George Mason, John Hopkins have already announced they will be decreasing. Some of them are cutting whole
That's amazing.
subcategories, like
This
we
is
had,
huge
we're gonna
amounts
take
of
4
money.
Asian.
But the institutional announcement, to me, that seems very fast. Alex, jump in.
400 million is fast, Jeremy. I mean, you take $400 million from anybody, they react fast, even big institutions.
I may be in denial, but I feel like there's a court battle coming.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a
um,
more battle coming. That's a given.
But it's just a matter of, they're saying maybe the next year they're gonna cut back
Yeah.
to see where they go.
Rutgers is cutting
While
massively.
they fight it out.
But-
Alex, jump in, please.
Yeah, in terms, so I have actual colleagues that did notify me. I can confirm the UPenn one, the Harvard one, the Princeton one, and Columbia for sure are cutting down on their acceptances for new students. One of my colleagues here who's doing a terminal master's and is trying to do religious studies at Harvard, he got through every line of interview. He was already told under the table by the faculty member that he was getting in, and then the decision came down from above his head that they're not even accepting anyone in Japanese studies anymore. So it's already live.
I heard that.
The one if you do Chinese studies or mainland China, you might be familiar with Tsinghua, Fudan, and Beida or Peking University. All 3 of them were sent notices that they're restricting the amount of graduate students in Asian studies or Chinese studies. So how it's going to be hitting other people and other departments and campuses, it looks like it's already starting. The extent to which it does is going to be different, right? Because my institution accepts 3 PhD students every cycle for 5 years full funding, guaranteed. They don't accept anyone without a funding package at my institution. So what they did a couple years ago, even before I got here, is they used to accept maybe 7 to 10 students and give them partial funding packages. But they realized that what would actually work out better for the students that choose to go here is if you only accept a certain amount of students, but you offer them pretty much a full ride, full funding packages instead of partial. That is better for the individual students. Now, my department is still doing that. They still offer the PhD students full funding, whether it's TA-ships or fellowships, you're still given the full funding. The terminal master students that apply to our department do not get full funding. It's up to whatever funds are allocated. The last admission cycle we had 3 PhD and 3 terminal MAs. So the terminal MA students were given half funding, which is actually really good. So 1 year is covered for them. It's the rest that they would be for their 2-year program that they'll have to deal with. So in terms of like hearing news about cutting down on acceptances, it has already started, but it seems to have been more the private schools rather than the public ones. But I'm sure it's probably just a manner of, a waiting game potentially. But as long as you're guaranteed your funding package, so here's the other thing. If you have a funding package available and you signed it, the university is still responsible and obligated to give it to you. Outside of that, I have no idea. That's going to be a whole legal problem.
My nephew didn't have it, and he's a fish biology working for Fish and Game. And
Well, he was doomed to begin with.
yeah, I think Oregon, I think the Beavers are cutting that particular program for a year, is what he was told. Because they just don't have, our campus and 2 others are under investigation, and they would cut funding to us. We already got cut a little bit in some of the classes we're allowed to take. And if Humboldt, us, and Berkeley get punished for mentoring minority students, we will suffer here too. So
We're in good company.
yeah,
We're Cal State San Bernardino is under investigation. And I will say
it was
that
in
we're-
Saturday's newspaper or the Times, if you haven't seen it.
We are in good company. We're up there with the big dogs.
Yeah.
Margaret, please, not to be too flippant about it, but
Yeah, I just want to say for the recording, just for posterity and for who's ever listening to this, there's a huge difference between Ivy Leagues on the East Coast and private colleges and the UC system. I know some college administrators. California's fighting back. We don't need to doom spiral. We need to move ahead, move forward as if everything's fine. Not saying that nothing is happening or nothing could happen, but I just don't want people to be discouraged about applying. Like, push forward, keep going. Don't be like, oh no, we can't do it because Columbia has been hit with a 400. If that's Columbia, we're in California. And listen, we may not be protected, but we might be. So keep on keeping on.
I'm just preparing people, and other universities are Ithaca, New England School of Optometry, Alabama. Roll Tide.
well,
I did not just say roll tide.
hold on.
Leave now.
I do think Margaret makes a good point in terms of the different institutional things. I think one thing that's going to be very, very crucial here is going to be solidarity, and also, yeah, absolutely, sort of looking ahead. But indeed, I think sending these applications in, I don't think anybody should be put off from sending applications. I absolutely agree with Margaret there that get your applications in, get your funding package, get accepted, and then, as some of our guests here have found, you get accepted into multiple institutions, and then you go wherever it's best for you to end up. Good stuff. Jump in.
Having went through this, because I've already got my doctorate. I went through law school during the late or the early 2000s. Like I was driving into Rutgers in 2001 when the towers were hit. That was a traffic jam from hell. That was when the bubble dropped for the lawyers. The lesson here is you are going to have a harder time getting in. You need to be more strategic. You need to start thinking about, I love this thing, but there's no professor out there that loves this thing.
Right, you know, that's a sort of
right,
fundamental
and
question.
including,
Absolutely.
this is gonna sound really strange as we're all panicking over that. You may need to aim for universities you never put on your list that are so out of your league.
Oh, that's a really good point, actually.
Because I'm aiming for Johns Hopkins, because my best option right now, and Jeremy can verify this, because we've been talking about it for 2 years, is there is a professor at Johns Hopkins who specifically loves what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And Johns Hopkins is out of my league.
No, I think, well, you know, you do aim high, but you do, I included a UC in my application package because an advisor I had, it was at Columbia, so I am the problem. I was at Columbia and an advisor said, you really should head out to UCSD. You should check out what they have. And so I just, as almost an afterthought, I did my due diligence, I learned about it, but I applied to UCSD and I applied to all the other neighborhood schools so that I wouldn't have to go too far from home. And I got into a couple institutions, but I got into UCSD and that surprised me. And they flew me out and they took really good care of me and everything was great from there. But that was a surprise and I ended up there. So indeed, that's a really good point. And this, I think, echoes Margaret's point of optimism and of sort of omnivorous application. You know, who knows what's gonna, I have a colleague who ended up in Oklahoma and, you know, you do apply widely for these programs. It's gonna hit the pocketbook just a little bit. For a month or so, you're gonna see a ding in your regular income because you're gonna have to do those $200 application fees. But do apply widely. Do definitely apply widely.
I just plan for the worst and hope for the best, and I shoot for what I can. You know, even what I can't, but I still do it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to prepare you. My nephew was crushed until he called and they explained to him, and he questioned it, but I just, you know.
That's right. It sounds like you've got the scoop. That is what happened. Gustavo, please, I don't want to keep our guests too much past the bottom of the hour because I think we heard from Jose how much sleep you guys are getting. So I maybe in about 10 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, I want to wrap up. Gustavo, and then I think Fernando was going to jump in. But Gustavo, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask really quick, because I did well, they did mention they did interdisciplinary studies, right? So I was just wondering, is it really like what are the differences between well, I mean, you already talked about the differences, but um is it mandatory to join a PhD program through an indiscipline with interdisciplinary studies, I guess? I don't know if that question is coming
No,
up.
that just happens to be our crew. Kristina is in a history department, and these other three guys, by some bizarre coincidence, are all in interdisciplinary programs. But that's not required, Gustavo. But I think you will be expected to do minor fields and that kind of thing. But Jose and Fernando, were you going to jump in on something earlier? Okay. And then go to Jose.
I was just gonna say I have to leave in a little bit, but you mentioned 5 to 10 minutes, and I'm fine. I did want to mention on the interdisciplinary studies. It depends on your department. Some of them, by nature, are interdisciplinary. So, like mine is a really weird mix of like ancient studies, literary and language fields, and then Islamic and religious like studies. But you can do like I'm doing a history project too. However, the people on my committee and the people that I work with are a history professor, an anthropology professor, and a literary professor. And then I think another history professor as well. Really funnily though, they're like, I was informed that I have to pick one other person, or I have to cut one and pick someone from my department. So there are still like certain requirements that you have to follow based on your department. But if you're in another department, I know like history students do have minor fields, but they mostly just frequent the history classes. Like they don't go outside that department and they usually will go to a department that is really tangential or does similar work to them. It just depends on what you want to do. I ended up in an interdisciplinary study just because it allowed a little bit more flexibility. I sometimes wish I would have just joined the history department though.
That's good. That actually addresses some of Jasmine's question there as well. Sorry, Gustavo, are you going to jump back in?
No, thank you. I appreciate the answer.
Thanks, Gustavo. Jose, were you going to jump in on this question?
Yes, I was gonna say something. Yeah, for example, me as a historian, I'm gonna be working. My research topic is Mexican Catholics in Southern California. So pretty much, I will use history, and I will use the ethnic studies methodology, and also social anthropology. Pretty much, the department, of course, asked us, in my case, to learn about theory and all this stuff that I didn't learn in my MA in history. But of course, I'm gonna get another MA in Chicana studies. But pretty much, it's really helpful to be a historian because that's gonna be my main, we'll say, my main research. And it doesn't matter if you're a historian and you end up into interdisciplinary, because at the end you will have more job offerings after your PhD. So it is really good to have be into any interdisciplinary program.
Thanks, Jose. I think that's a really good point, and a little bit following Fernando's comment and Jasmine's question, you can make use of other departments. You will, even though you're in an interdisciplinary program, have a kind of home discipline, and you'll reach out to these other disciplines as well. And you can make the most of that, especially when you, just to your point, your question, Jasmine, and this may be something that Alex and Fernando and Jose agree with. If your committee members are interdisciplinary, then your work is going to be spread across a few different departments. So if you are really excited about anthropology or religious studies like Jose, or literary studies, literature studies, or something like that, you're going to have a foot in that connection to that department, most likely as well. But that's yeah, I think that's a rich avenue. And thanks, Alex, for sharing your email address as well as Kristina did. And the quick point question from Alex a second ago was to apply widely. That's a do as I say, not as I do situation from Alex, because he was spearfishing very specifically for one program and he got it. But he also says, do apply widely. And I think that's a good do as I say, not as I do piece of advice. Margaret, please.
Yeah, just real quick for everyone who applied, I'm just really curious if you only applied for history. Obviously, the interdisciplinary, applied for other things, but did you apply for more than just history programs? And if so, did you sort of I don't know, I guess Frankenstein or sort of like reshape your idea of what you wanted to research to fit those programs? Like, for example, Jose, if you obviously do history, Chicano studies, like all of those things, Latin American studies, but did you sort of rewrite it all and apply for religious studies at all or anything like that?
No, well, I will answer what happened with me. It is I reached Professor Robert Chao Romero. He's a historian, but he's also a religious studies scholar, and he is the head of the department uh, in Chicano studies. So pretty much, when I talked to him, I asked him what was the possibilities to be into the history program. He suggested me to go into Chicana studies because pretty much he was working more in Chicana studies. There are some professors like in UCLA, like they are historians, but they are working in different other departments. They work together, like Kelly Hernandez. She is the head of the African American department, but she's a historian. And so reach out the professor you want to work with and ask them which department they work and if what they suggested to do. In my case, Robert Chow, he suggested me to go into the Chicana studies because it was the place where we could work better.
That's great advice, Jose. And I think along the lines of reaching out with an initial query, and I think Jose did really well to put himself in sort of in Robert Chow Romero's hands, sort of say, well, you know, where do I fit here? Because he had a lot of preliminary conversations. They wanted to work with each other, and they could sort of survey the landscape and say, this is where you should be. You should, you know, because somebody like, I think actually same applies to Alex and Fernando. Same applies to Jose in terms of your lead advisors having a really great institutional awareness, whether in Jose's case, they're the chair of the department or they had appointments in multiple departments. He could say, yeah, go meet me over here. This is where we're going to work together. And it was a good fit. So I think that kind of outreach, that initial conversation is going to be really important. Alex.
I know I only applied to one school, but funny enough, the reason why I applied to one school and one department is actually because of that question, that statement I mentioned earlier about asking the professors if they are accepting students. And the UCSB History department with Jeremy, you might know who this is. Shaowei in the department was not accepting students for the year that I applied. And she was Jeremy's she was your colleague over at San Diego?
Yes, she's my classmate in the doctoral program.
Yeah, so the history department was not accepting students for modern Chinese history the year that I applied. And so I was like, oh, okay. But she was affiliated with my department. And so I just looked at our department website, and then that's when I found some advisors that my work also deals with and could work under. But at the same time, I put together my committee a couple months back, and I have a co-chairs for my committee and then a third committee member. So I have two people of equal standing versus one, which is not that common. I was in crisis mode because I wanted to do historical work, but I couldn't find someone that could join my committee. Lo and behold, last year we got a endowed chair of Taiwan studies who's a historian last year. And so that's individual is now my co-chair. And so I get to still be trained as a historian and kind of use my historical background and still be able to present myself in a way and use methods and research that I am interested in. And so that just ended up working out in my case. So it's also, you can shop for your faculty members and see what works. In my case, you're going to have 3 committee members, and you can have 2 that are in your department and 1 that's affiliated. It could be that person is affiliated in religious studies, anthropology department, global studies. It could be literature department. It really depends on, whatever that faculty member is, which is why that email question is really important. Is you need to also ask them if they're taking students for that particular application cycle, because it's not cheap to apply to grad schools. And if they're saying no, you just wasted your application. Or in the case of like Jose, they can point you and say, hey, actually, you would be a better fit here. And then it works out in your favor, right? So
that's good. That's a great experience to share. And I want to move toward wrapping up. The last little soundbite I have is from Confucius, actually, stereotypically, I know, but Confucius said the best kind of student is the one where you give them one corner and they come back with the other 3. That is, you give a student one piece of instruction and they come back with really filling in an enormous amount of the work as self-starters. And I just want to say that of these 4, all 4 of our guests who join us are in that category. Having worked with all four of them in various capacities on the journal as MA students, as undergrad students, the kind of student who, and this is the instruction to all of you, when your advisor or your instructor gives you a piece of information or guidance or instruction, you then take that and bring all of your energy and all of your excitement and all of your expertise and hard work to it. That's the kind of student, that's the kind of scholar in training that a future PhD advisor is looking for. Not somebody who always needs their hand held, but somebody who is ready to do that kind of intensive work. So that's what I just thought of that while I was listening to the three of you and to Kristina talking about your experiences. That level of engagement and desire to really thrive in this field needs to be very, very clear, and it is for all of you four. And I think that's one reason you're doing such really, really exciting work. I'm very, very grateful for you all for joining us and through your dinner. And Alex, Fernando, Jose, thank you. Do you have any parting shots? Any final thoughts for us?
Do something active while you're in your PhD. That's why I box. I just got done grading midterms, and some of the students, I was like, we went over some of this so much and you still messed it up. But also a lot of our work is just sitting and reading and typing. So it's always good to stay active, have a sport, have a hobby, have something outside of academia.
Thanks, Jose, for sharing your email as well. And Alex says badminton and weightlifting. Badminton, nice. Did you pick that up in Taiwan?
Funny enough, the courts were being renovated because they were preparing for the typhoons. But I have a couple colleagues here that wanted to play when I came back, and so I just kind of observed a couple different places, and then when I came back, I just picked up a racket and started playing with them.
That is a lot of fun. All right. Jose, any final thoughts?
No, that's all. And we're here to help. And I mean, don't be afraid, as I say. I mean, don't be afraid to apply, and you guys can get it. Okay, you guys can get it. Just try. Okay.
Thanks, Jose.
Thank
Absolutely.
you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
It's so great to catch up with you, Jose, Fernando, Alex. Thank you so much for joining, and the folks from across campus. I'm going to go ahead and shut down the meeting, and then our MA crew will hop back in. But thank you, guys. I'll catch up with you later.
Oh, Gustavo's had his hand up.
Good luck. No, he's clapping.
Oh,
I'm just clapping.
it's all blurry.
I'm going to go try and grab coffee while you're changing it. I
Where
need
you
coffee.
going?
Thanks,
I
guys.
think she'll be open for another.
He closes